Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today on using learning progressions to differentiate to support students. I'm Danielle Mayer. I teach at the primary school, second grade reading intervention. So we just started to kind of dive into using these progressions as a lot of our readers are below benchmark. So we're going to get started today with just a quick agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about why we should use some learning progressions. We're going to design some progressions based on our standards. Ohio has a version. You can create your own. Then we're going to say we have these really great progressions. Now what's next? How do we assess and figure out where kids are? How do we set goals and give them the opportunities to reflect? And then share some specific instructional opportunities. Just so that we're all clear on the same page, we're going to talk for just a second about what my thoughts are when I think about learning progression so that we make sure that we're all thinking the same thing. I kind of think of it as a continuum. So here's where we are today, and here's where we would like to be, or our goal, whether that's the benchmark or whether that's just where I think I can push this kid. Originally, when I first started working a lot with Heidi Weber, she kind of introduced me to progressions when we were talking about writing through Lucy Calkins' Writing Pathways. And then through more of our work, we kind of dove into the Fountas and Pinnell Literacy Continuum, which is an amazing tool that kind of breaks down different standards or skills into more strategies and smaller parts. And we kind of used that when we were looking at building the word work sequence for K-4. And then most recently, I went to a workshop with Jennifer Saravello, and her work with reading comprehension strategies specifically, but also vocabulary and some other things, creating that continuum and figuring out where a learner is and how we can push them through that goal setting and the conferencing has really strengthened my understanding of that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So the way I think about this is we have this goal, and so our goal is like our standard or what we want our readers to know or our students to know. Then from that standard, we have all these skills they have to be able to do. But to be able to do those skills, we have to say these are the strategies they need to master that skill. So when we think about it, we want to think about our goal, our standard, and then the skills would be the parts of our learning progression. And then when I know where a kid is, what skills they've mastered, then I can use the strategies that they need to take them to the next strategy along. So we're going to watch this really quick video by Kate Roberts called Pivot. And we're going to be thinking about, while we're watching it, how do learning progressions help us to make our inevitable transition from in-person to remote smoother and like a continuous process for us if we start right away with some of the elements of using learning progressions with our students. So we pause my video. It's about 10 minutes. You can click on the link and go ahead and watch this video. So now that you've watched the video and you come back, hopefully you took away some of the key ideas that you could use learning progressions with your kids. You can make them visible. You can have kids identify where they think they are. And that if we make that inevitable transition to remote, that we can still project those. We can still talk about those. And if we've already set up those things and processes in our classrooms at the beginning of the school year, then if we have to go remote at any point, we still have that base for ourselves. So now we're going to look at our personal selves, right? So we're going to look at our Ohio standards. So when we look at, I kind of linked in here, our ELA, math, science, social studies, and then the additional learning standards. And in Ohio, they have a progression. They've made these great learning continuum progressions. And at first thought, I thought, wow, this is so great. It's going to make everything so much easier. It's going to be great. Well, for me in second grade, we don't have a continuum because there isn't enough before to make the continuum or the progression. So they really start in third grade making that that progression. So you'll have to decide whether you think this is useful to you or not. And each of these are linked in, so you can check them out for your content area. And then Mr. Rodriguez, or Kevin Rodriguez, in fourth grade at LES, shared with us during the session that there was a math coherence chart or map. So I linked that also in at the bottom there. So I want us to really think about picking one standard. And we can use the language and the wording of these Ohio progressions, or we can totally just come up with it on our own. And we're going to really create a continuum. We're going to create a progression for one of our standards. And so when we look at the example down here in the bottom corner, when you open these, you're going to see the learning standard, and then you're going to see that the complexity increases as you go through. So theirs is kind of backwards of what I normally do mine. And theirs has the least complex part on the right and the more complex part on the left. So typically for me, I do it the way we read, which would be the least complex on the left and the more complex on the right. But that's just the way I kind of focus mine. So I'm going to show you a few examples and then some templates, and then you're going to try to create your own. So here we go. So this one, I took the second grade literacy standard of developing a lesson or a moral. And what I did is I did it sort of like a line, right? And I put the yellow star where my students needed to be. Identifies a logical lesson or moral of the story stem from the important events. And then I kind of backpedaled it. Here, I didn't use the standards in first grade and kindergarten as my least confident parts of my continuum. I just went ahead and thought, as a teacher, what would be the next step down? So the next step down to the left is to identify a literal lesson, and maybe it's connected to important events, but maybe it's not, right? So a literal, like somebody found their shoes, whatever. And then behind that, maybe they don't even attempt a lesson. They really just tell an event that happened in the story. So, and then to the right, I put what would be my next level up, right? So they can identify the lesson and the moral of the story, and they use the support or evidence from the text to support their answer. So then I can give a sort of an assessment and figure out where my kids are. The next one I did using characters, and I pulled the second grade standard. So here's the learning progression that they had. And so I put that as number 3. So this is my second grade learning progression. Describe how the character, and I put in parentheses by name because it's really important to me as that students use the characters' names. He, it, they does not tell me if they're talking about the right person or not. So I really emphasize to my readers to really use that name. So how the character responds to or changes from a major event in the story. And so then I took the third grade standard in order to get my number 4. And so if I was doing something like a rubric, here's where I might use point values. And it describes the characters by name, traits, feelings, motivations in the story, and how their actions affect the sequence. So this is a little more complex here. And then I used the first grade standard for our number 2 and the kindergarten standard for our number 1. So you can see how I used the standards to more or less make my progression. Either way is totally fine. It's really more what you're comfortable with and how detailed you get in teaching that specific skill. So when I teach a moral or a lesson, these are kind of more general. I teach very specific. So I wanted something more specific. When I teach characters, this is a pretty good way that I can use each grade level's standard to kind of make that progression. So now you're going to think to yourself, and we're going to do a backwards analysis, right? We're going to start with our curriculum goal or aim, so our standard. Which one do I want to use? And then to master this, what kind of skills do my students need? So we're kind of going to break it down backwards, right? And then from there, we're going to put it into a visual format that is easy to follow and easy for me to use as a teacher and share with my students. So what I did is I went ahead and have several templates, right? So you can click on the picture and it will take you to the template that you can use. Or I mean the bottom right corner, I'm sorry, where the red templates word is, and those are where the templates are. So you can do a table with point values. You can do a slide or a rubric, sort of like mine was. Or you can kind of get creative and you can insert a graphic that's called a progression, and it does like cooler, like amazing things that maybe you want to use because they look prettier. We had some people during our sessions share theirs, and we had an ELA retelling for second grade progression, and we had an intervention specialist use a student goals to make a progression. So take some time right now and go ahead and either use a template or make your own template and create a learning progression. A lot of times we hear, like, can we create these designs together? Can we create them with our class? Absolutely. But let's have a general process that we already have, like a progression that we already know in our brain, so we can guide that thinking to cover the standard that we need to do that. So this is the end of our first part of this. Take some time, make a progression, and then we'll come back together and see what it turned out, how it turned out, and where to go to next.